Welcome back to the Keep Going podcast, Vin Kennedy. I'm your host, Vin Kennedy. Today we have a special guest. This is Mike Harkins. Mark, you want to do a brief intro on yourself?
Sure, sure. Well, first, I do want to congratulate you on your sub 3 hour Houston Marathon. Very
Thank you, man.
impressive.
Appreciate it.
Continue to knocking down the barriers, and I'm enjoying following the journey. So, appreciate you having me on today. Yeah. So, as Vince said, Mike Harkins. I'm based in South Jersey, right outside Philadelphia. Vinny and I connected really through the running community, to which I'm fairly green in the space. Been running now for just about 3 years. Prior to that, active. I'm a father of three. I have twins that are 9, and then I have a 7-year-old. So part of what drives my activity is really just trying to stay as young as possible, keep up with them, and then be that example, living day by day so they can see really what hard work can pay off in the long run. So, always active, lifting weights, participating in events, um, but nothing in the running space. So COVID really opened up the door to that while gyms shut down. The world sort of came to a freeze. People didn't know what to do. um, that's when I started exploring what other options are there, outside of my normal day to day, to keep me active, keep me outside at least, and not be stuck indoors during that time period. So, um, yeah, I mean, I think that brought us together essentially, and ultimately why I'm here today and why we're talking.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And you hit on something that is the it's just such a thing that I often think about. Like I want a family of my own at some point here. Like to see the effect that you have on your children. And I'm curious, like, how have you seen kind of what you do, which we'll definitely get into, have a positive effect? Because I know it does.
Yeah. So the amazing thing that you sometimes fail to think or realize is that they see and hear everything that you do, right? Good and bad. And so you got to watch yourself in all areas. But there's also times over the years where I've just failed to not even think about how much they're soaking into what I do on a day to day, because I get so just entrenched in my routine. I'm very routine focused, and I have been prior to kids. So call it 10 years ago, 11 years ago, 2 years prior to the start of having a family. My workout schedule wasn't as rigid as far as timing goes. I had a lot more time, so I could go at night, I could go in the morning, I could go after work, pretty much could go whenever I wanted to around any other priorities. When I started to realize that the change of having a family meant prioritizing time more effectively, I sort of changed my schedule before even having kids to get used to it. So people ask now often, how do you wake up so early? How do you go to the gym early? How do you run? How do you do all of this before you start your day, essentially? And really, it's just, geez, it's been 10 years almost where I've lived on this similar schedule. So routine, consistency, I like to call it a repeatable process. It almost just is something you don't even think about anymore. I rarely wake up to an alarm. I always set one because I don't want to ever miss a morning, but I rarely wake up to it. I usually wake up prior to. And that was sort of the foundation that when my children started to realize what I do every day or every morning, they just started asking questions like, "Oh, why are you going outside? And what are you doing?" And I went through a period where I was doing the squat every day program I did it for over a year straight. So didn't miss one day. Every single day, you take a variation of a squat. Um, and then every day's variation had an equal rate of either reps or time under tension, or accessories built into it, right? So I had all the equipment at home, squat bar, rack, and all that. So initially, when they saw me doing that, they they wanted to hang on the bar. So I would literally do my session, leave the bar out, leave some weight on it so it wouldn't fall over, and then they would just start swinging on it. And then from there, they actually started doing pull-ups on it, or just hanging chin ups, whatever you want to call it. But I just sort of incorporated them into what I was doing. So, and I did almost all of this program. This is prior to COVID, but I was doing the majority of it at home, especially weekends. So my rule of thumb is never go to a gym on a weekend. I honestly don't love going, period, but it is a place where it has everything I need. I can move through what I want to do efficiently, get in and out. But weekends, no, like always dedicated to doing something outdoors or at my home. And my gym is typically I store it in the garage and I pull it out of the garage. And I'm talking minimal equipment, right? But that's when they really started to see what I was doing and equating early mornings to the work I was doing. And now that they're older and can really see what's going on, and I've had them participate in things with me as far as the runs I started doing. Then they always ask me questions. Why do you do this? Why do you do that? It's almost insulting sometimes because they'll say, "How many miles did you run today?" And I'll say, "Well, it was a tough one. I did 20 miles." Only 20? Like you've done 50 before, you know. So yeah, long story short is they see, they know, and they're actually comprehending the activity. And now it's a point of their life when they're getting into sports and academics are a priority. It's like all of what I do is practice, right? And that's what I explain to them. Everything that I do each and every day is really just practice for me to have a sustainable, healthy life. And I said, you need to take what I do every day and apply that to whatever your interests are. It's school, and whether it's basketball, it's baseball, and you want to get better at it, right? Okay, good. Now let's go out and do it every day. Something. Um, and then apply that to your skill set and you'll get better. And then I always have to bring it back because there's usually, discomfort through growth for them. And I explained that that's all part of the process. So it's been fun seeing them witness what I was doing, participating, asking questions, and now at 9 and 7, we're starting to apply it to their lives.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, it's how does it affect you showing up? Because I would imagine that it just has to help you in all domains, right? Because now you know that you have people watching and obviously your children watching and you're kind of like leading from example.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a double-edged sword because if I don't show up or I can't show up, let's call it, really not showing up is I call it a non-negotiable. Doesn't happen. Unless I'm sick, injured, whatever. But even injured, I can find something to do. So really showing up is just it's happening. The downside of it is if there's conflicts in time, then it can be a negative on my attitude towards my day, right? Because I like to get the hardest part of my day done really before the day starts. Having something hang over my head like, hey, I want to knock out 10 miles today, and I can't do it until the afternoon, call it. That hangs over me because I know I have to get it done. I know it's going to take me an hour and a half, let's call it. Um, and it's the most rewarding feeling to get 10 miles knocked out before 5 a.m. and to know, wow, okay, great. The hardest part of my day is done. The rest of the day is going to be super productive and less of a focus on a goal I wanted to achieve, versus getting it done. And now you can open yourself up to everything. So yeah, I try to explain that to them too. Like, if it's a sporting event, if it's an event they have for school or whatever, that's always priority. And I'll never let that come in between what I'm doing. But that's also why I get up early because the quiet hours of that 3 a.m. to call it 6 a.m., I mean, there's really never anything going on. And it's that time to get stuff done where you feel accomplished for your day, for that day. And then you're ready to fulfill the rest of your day.
It's true. And that's the interesting thing too, where like every day that slate's wiped clean and it's kind of like a reset. But I would love to if you want to just run through your schedule. Obviously, I know it from talking to you and obviously Instagram, but if you kind of want to run through it because it's just nails. There's no other way to put it.
Yeah. So it's pretty routine, and monotonous, right? But through the monotony, I feel builds not just character, but builds us up overall. So typically I'm up between 3:30 and 4, on any given day. And I've tried to prioritize sleep a little bit more into my routine. I used to get up at 3, 3:15, call it. And now I've added that extra half hour to almost 45 minutes in. So my sleep has actually gotten better overall, which, quite frankly, I'm never really totally wiped out at the end of each day, but I don't need any sleep formulas to go to bed. I mean, there's all these different sleep drinks and Beam Dream and all this stuff, and it looks great, and I'm like, I just don't need it. Like I fall asleep fine. And I only use my Garmin to track my sleep. So how accurate it is as far as my true REM, who knows? But I feel fine, right? And then I gauge activity level based on my fatigue in the morning. So really, I gauge my CNS, so my central nervous system, depending how shot that is after a given previous day's load, is what I try to anticipate for that day's running slash lifting, whatever it is that I have on my plate. So wake up, say 3:34, and then if it's a lifting session, and I'll kind of rewind a little bit. Last year, during all the miles I built, and it's funny, I had a call this morning with Joe Rinaldi, and he was asking me the same thing, Bart, what's your goals this year? Because last year I didn't set out to run 4,000 miles. That wasn't a goal. It just sort of fell into place over time. But in training for the Leadville 100, I knew I had to divert away from lifting as heavy and as a priority as I was, and really just make that leap into logging more miles. Because at the time I was doing 30, 40, maybe 50 miles a week prior to that changeover. Once I started going up to 80 to 100 miles a week, I was virtually lifting maybe 2 days a week. And the majority of it was body weight exercises, right? Which was fine because my overall goal was a 100-mile race. And so the sacrifice was worth it. Now, 2024, I'm really starting to lean into, well, let's seriously try to maintain strength, hitting barbell exercises, focusing on that while keeping a high mileage weekly pace, right? So, I came off this injury, broken toe at the end of December. Really only was off for about 12 days running wise. I was still doing assault bike, still lifting, just not really putting too much weight on my toe, and then doing a vigorous recovery to get back. And it's about 95% back now, and we're starting to ramp miles up. But I'm also maintaining strength. So now it's 5 days a week lifting. So I get up every morning pretty much, go right to the gym by 5, and then run afterwards or shortly afterwards, after the kids go to school, try to squeeze it in. And that's been my new routine as far as lifting, running, and then focusing nutrition and recovery around that. Right. So working virtually helps because I don't have a commute. So if you think about it, most people commute, call it a half hour one way. So that's an hour of your day commuting. And then I know from being in an office for years, you spend over an hour or two meandering the hallways, going to get drinks, going to the fridge. Like it's just a different atmosphere. And if you equate all that time, plus the ability to wake up early and focus on your emails and build out your calendar and do everything you need to do before you start your day, you have so much time to do other things and still be ultra productive at your job, right? So that allows me to have the schedule that I have now. And then once the kids come back from school, it's really just getting them in a place to focus on their homework, which is never really much. And then I stay really in my virtual home office till about 6 o'clock, um, and then shut it down from there, really. And then, try to go to bed between 9 and 10, roughly. But with the three kids, you never know what, like, it's trying to get them to go to bed. It's hanging out with them, it's reading with them. And a lot of times I end up falling asleep anyway. So, um, that's pretty much the routine.
Yeah, no, I love it. And you hit on something earlier where you mentioned kind of training. You almost within training, you're training for a family before having a family. And it's something that I've been implementing. 3 days a week, I'm in the city. I need to be in the city by 6 a.m. So obviously I was in the prep for a sub three and running was the priority. Now I'm in prep for nothing and getting up at 3 a.m. and hitting those miles 3 days a week is an absolute game changer. We've always done it on the weekends, but now implementing it during the week. And I used to do it, but again, it would be like, hey, if I'm tired, I'm just gonna take the day off, or kind of like let that one slip, unfortunately. But now seeing like my sister has a 1.5 year old. So just being with my nephew, being with family already, it's something that I'm implementing. And I tell so many people about you. It's so funny. Like even it's funny. No, it's seriously like my family, just friends, and then like girls that come into my life. It's like, obviously when you're just having like open conversation, it's like, well, what happens with training like when you have kids or when you get older? And I'm like, no, 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 you don't understand. Like there's guys out here doing it. Like I have a friend who like his Saturdays look like the most fun day in the world to me. It's like I see it. You're up at what, 3:34, you're knocking out like a marathon in the morning, and then it's like literally all day. I'm like, and then you're doing like dinner with the family. I'm like, there's nothing better with that than that. Like I'm already doing that. I just don't have children.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and there's give and take, right? Like I probably train more now than I ever did in my life. And more efficiently, more effectively, more health focused. I mean, it's, with time, like the beauty of you and Dan and Greg and what you're building is that you have the youth by your side as well. Like you're very knowledgeable, dedicated, disciplined in all of your motions, which is going to lead to success. But you also have that now gap of like time to build it and see those rewards at a younger age. I don't regret anything, but I look back, shoot, I'm 45. So if I was 25 and altered my training to what I'm doing now, then, you know, uh, wow, like where would I, what could have been the limits 20 years later, right? Um, I just think about it now because I think about what I did then versus now. And it's like a lot of it's just knowledge that you gain over time, but also scheduling, prioritizing your time. And it's funny, like, COVID was what it was. It's a horrible time for a lot of people, but it altered my life for the positive, right? Like I look at it as like not a blessing in disguise, but an opportunity in life to make decisions based on your schedule, what's going on in the world and how you can positively affect your life. Um, and so, yeah, it really changed everything at that point. But having the foundation to what you're saying is, you know, having the early mornings, early starts to the day, and just being present. Like it's tough, because in technology today with phones and pads and all this, my kids are now into that where they want their own phones, they want to play their games, Roblox, and all this other stuff. And a lot of times we're so busy in what we do, it's like, okay, here, take this, be occupied. But then after a while, you're like, man, they're just spending way too much time on a screen. And then that's why on weekends, I try to get as much as I can done before that, call it 8 o'clock in the morning. And I really don't want them on screens in the morning. Like, winter sucks because it's colder, it's rainy, whatever. It's tougher to get them out and enjoy something. And that's probably why come spring and summer, like we try to get them out, like travel, go away on weekends, just I think experiences and opportunities to do things together outdoors outside of the home because the home almost reinforces this common feel like, oh, well, we're allowed to do this because we're home and it's the weekend. And it's like, no, we're going to, New Hampshire to go skiing. And guess what? Your devices are for the car and that's it. And then guess what? You spend 4 or 5 days, it goes by like that, but they've done so much, whether it's skiing, hiking, just being out together. And granted, there's still, fighting between the three, and it's not easy, right? As they get older, it gets more difficult. You talk about your family and you being an uncle to a 1.5-year-old, right? It's like cherish those days because as hard as it is with diapers changing and sleep schedules and crying and temper tantrums and everything, like we're watching videos now. Even my kids go back and watch videos of themselves. Like they're doing that a lot now. Just going back and looking at these videos and making fun of themselves. And I'm like, geez, can we trade that back? Because it's just different parts of
Absolutely.
life. But I do love those early years. And it goes by so fast. Like every day is long, they say, and it's true, days can be super long, but those years fly. And it's like now I'm trying to like take deep breaths, take a step back and like appreciate where they're at now, despite some of the challenges.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's true. It really does. And I mean, even if like you look back at I mean, I'm removed myself from like high school or college for like 4 years. Like it's not that long. Like it really isn't. And it's crazy.
Yeah, totally.
Just one word that like, and I know you know it, but when I think of you, it's just consistency. And I was just curious what that word means to you.
Yeah, so it's one of those words that drives me crazy, particularly about people around me, right? For me, consistency there's no doubt you're showing up. And if you're committed to something, you're doing it 100%. Um, and to a fault, sometimes I will be an all-in type of person, which I am with most things, which means I'm putting a lot of myself into it, or you're putting your heart into it. And so people can let you down, and it happens all the time. And so for me, consistency is day by day showing up, doing what you say you're going to do, and executing on whatever it is your plan is. Um, and without missing, right? Like there's no reason to miss other than, things out of your control, right? If you get sick or something like that. But ultimately, if there's something you're planning to do and you know you represent a certain lifestyle, there's no reason to miss. Consistency for me is part of that because being a true example, whether it's to my family or anybody that that I come across on a day to day, like if I'm not consistent, then how are they to look towards me for advice or potentially have somebody that they can say, hey, I can mirror my life to be better because I see somebody else doing it, right? So there's times, rare times that I'm like, I don't feel like, running today or whatever. And then I think, well, if I don't, then what about the person who's been trying to get into running because they followed me and they see that I'm skipping out and I don't have a valid reason? Like, this is what goes through my head, right?
Yeah.
And then I just think to myself, there's no excuse. Like, just do it. And then on top of it, you feel so much better after, anyways. Like, that's always the end result is no matter how much you don't want to do something, at the end of whatever you do that you accomplish, you always feel 100 times better that you actually did it. So, you know, consistency is that really it's representing what you say and what you do within your life.
It's true. And with consistency, I've been tying in like respect, and it's respect from other people and it's self-respect, which is the most important form, where it's like you can show up for yourself, now other people can trust you. And even to your point, like I drag my feet sometimes worse than anybody I know. And you're right, like, and I still like I won't miss though. Like I might have to run it at 10 p.m., which obviously isn't ideal, but like I won't miss. And I'm at such a point right now where like to get out the door sometimes sucks. But I hit like mile 1 or 2, and I've just been like absolutely floating. So I'm like, you're dragging your feet to do this thing that you then enjoy. Like it's the sickest thing. And then you're right, you finish and you feel like amazing. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny that we all go through it.
And I think, the hardest thing about running is as far as the endurance part of it. So whether you equate it to biking or swimming, anything that you do that requires a minimum of 1 hour effort. And then for us, a lot of times it goes into two, it goes into three, it goes into four. The upfront preparation for that requires so much thought process and effort. So if you're waking up at 3 in the morning, as you know, you're really not going to start your first mile until 3:45, 4, because of everything that goes into it. Fueling yourself, hydrating yourself, thinking about what your route's going to be and how you're going to stay on point with your nutrition throughout your run, making sure that you're making the most of your time, with being able to do it again tomorrow. And so with all that, it becomes that mental challenge of like, man, I gotta eat. I gotta down my hydration drink. I gotta do this. I gotta, prep my belt. I gotta, whatever it is. Um, Going to the gym is so easy. I mean, it's like you put your shoes on, you grab a pre-workout drink or something to hydrate, maybe a quick nutrition bar, and you go. You really don't need much. But for running, and like you said, like when you want to do something, you're dragging your feet. A lot of it's because of the mental aspect of the preparation going into it.
It's yeah, it's so true. And I actually just had a conversation with someone this morning, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. And it was the person setting a goal just to start walking on the treadmill 3 days a week. And they were getting frustrated because like they're getting in it now, they're getting interested, and they were going to miss their goal for. It looks like they might miss their goal for this week. And it was one of those things where it's like take a step back, like look at the progress you've already made, like be okay with that and understand that like yes, in the beginning, like you might not be perfect every day, but it is the showing up and the consistency. And then I was taking a step back and looking at it, and I'm like, and again, not to actually compare as far as like physical effort, but for that person that's just starting like a walking journey, like that's equivalent to like where we're at to hit 10 miles in the morning. Like obviously it doesn't sound the same, but for us it is. So it's like the level of hard changes, but you also get better. So it's like you need to keep meeting that standard. And
Right.
especially the way we work, it's just sky's the limit.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I have to do a post later today that I've been thinking about, but a lot of it's, hey, the the new 5 miler for us become 10. Like it's almost become a baseline. And with that though, it's like, all right, I gotta hit my at least 10. Whereas it used to be like I'm just hitting 3 to 5 or whatever the case may be. But as your fitness grows and as your capacity enables you to do more, there's almost like there's no reason why you shouldn't do the 10 because you've built yourself to do that. It's just finding the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd be so curious to hear like how do you interact with other fathers like at Little League and stuff like that? Because I know like you finish a 30 miler in the morning and you go throughout your day and you're just talking to people and like comes up in conversation. People are like, wait, you did what this morning? So I'd be so curious to hear how it goes for you.
Yeah, so it's challenging, right? There's a guy on my street who's a friend of ours that we just don't see very often because of they have younger kids and whatever. But he's a quote unquote runner, like doesn't really lift. He's been running for a majority of his life. Mostly was doing 5Ks, and then finally, about 2 years ago, he got more into like having a coach. Joined a run club here in Haddonfield, and last year he did a bunch of marathons. And but I can talk to him about running and talk, and he understands the language, right? And we often see each other sometimes out on the road and sometimes run a little bit together. Um, he's the only one in my town that can relate to me on the aspect of running. He can't relate to me on the lifting part. Has no concept of like I told him like yeah, this morning I went and did a squat session, hit 275, did leg press, but I can run through my entire lifting session and he's like, "What? Like what do you, that's crazy. Like what are you talking about?" And then you went and ran like, so he doesn't understand that. As far as the other conversations, like most don't comprehend it because they don't live the lifestyle. And a lot of the ones that do um, want the lifestyle don't want to put the work into doing it. So the conversations are pretty quick. Like if it's a what'd you do this morning? Oh yeah, I knocked out 20 miles. Like what? 20 miles? Like I didn't even drive 20 miles the last 2 days. So the comprehension of it is just not there. And a lot of it's like you get the look of like, okay, like you're kind of crazy or whatever. And it's tough. It doesn't allow me to forge strong relationships with other fathers because that's a big part of my extracurricular life. I have no problem. I have a couple guys I'm really close to, and really it's because our sons are friends and we're often at the same events, and they're just good guys, good fathers, good representations of the community. And we can talk about other things related to life that we're on the same wavelength, just not physical activity. And that's great, right? Like I need that too. But if it comes to just regular guys that you just see because you're in the same town, it's very few that I'm able to connect with on a deeper level beyond what I call just acquaintances, really.
Yeah, makes sense. And then for you personally, like what does the word balance mean to you? And do you apply it and how do you apply it?
Sure. So balance is super important. Most people that follow me think I have zero balance or very minimal balance. They may see that I have balance with my family, right? Which I do. That's priority number one is, like I said, finishing physical activities before then having family activities. But that's balance. It's making sure you're meeting your obligations for your goals, whether it's fitness, running, lifting, whatever, but then also being there for every event possible for your family. So that's the ultimate balance. And then there's the other balance, which is, how you eat, how you how your nutrition is around your activities. I mean, look, I eat pretty much anything I want. I'm a relatively good eater when it comes to nutrition, but I love pizza. I love fries. I love beer. Like, but I don't do anything in excess. It's all moderation. Obviously, when it comes to alcohol, there's negative effects all around it and how it affects your performance. And alcoholism runs in my family. So I've never been one to overly consume because I never wanted to be in a position where I'm addicted to it. Um, Nowadays, like if I were to have two beers, and I like the athletic brewing, so a lot of times I'll do 1-to-1 ratio. I'll have an athletic brewing and then I'll have a regular beer. And then that can sustain you for a longer night without much effect on you the next day. Um, but that's the balance. The balance is I'm not going to neglect myself to go out and have a good time with other folks. If it's at a brewery or if it's at a local event, or I mean, I love doing that stuff. So, but I do know my limits, and I do know the time and place. So, for instance, if I know tomorrow Saturday morning I have that window to knock out 20 miles, then Friday night is going to be a carb load focused type night, which, hey, pizza's perfect. Um, but also, I'm not going to be willing to have a couple beers that night, right? I would say that I would rather have that on Saturday night, knowing, hey, I knocked out 20 miles today, makes you feel like you can reward yourself in moderation.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last question I'm gonna ask everybody is what keeps you going?
Yeah, I think you probably know. But really, what keeps me going is my kids. I mean, I always want like where you're at in life. I always wanted to be a father. I was an only child growing up, so I didn't have siblings to grow up with. And I remember thinking throughout that whole time period that if I could be a father, I definitely wanted to have more than one. Um, and then, with life, there's trials and tribulations with just trying to have kids. Like it's not easy anymore. And so once that finally came to fruition, that was the roadmap for keep it going and not stopping. And I want to continue that, right? Because shoot, I'm 45, like 10 more years, they're going to be, end of high school, entering college, but I want to still be able to outrun them, out train them. Like I want to be, still the leader of the family and be able to set the tone every single day. And so that's what keeps me going too, is like you can have rest days, that's fine. But I'm not, there's weeks, there's months, and all that comes into play where I'm just not going to miss because there's so much riding on me to be a provider in all aspects of being a father. And so ultimately, that's what keeps me going.
I love it, man. Honestly, I really, really appreciate the time and you post motivate me and it's just it's cool to see you doing the thing and leading from the front as a father.
Appreciate that. Yeah, it's been fun. It's my it's my escape sometimes from what's could be stressful about raising a family. But at the end of the day, like there's nothing better.
Thank you, brother.